Good afternoon. This is a quick video follow-up of my last video, which of course it's not going to be nearly as amazing. I love the natural golden light here in New Mexico. It is cold and windy, but it's not as cold as I expected, so I'm pretty happy about that. I'm sitting in the sunshine. I was afraid to come outside because I thought it would be so cold, because that's the problem with New Mexico, is that even if your temperature says that it's in the 50s and it's golden and sunny and bright, you go outside and there's this awful cold wind blowing. But it's not as cold as I expected, so that's nice. Of course, this might be a second video to my first part about the sign of Jonah, but it won't be as amazing because here at the Ave Maria Grotto, I will not be video bombed by my dog. I know, my dog's amazing. That dog that video bombed me in that video, he is obnoxious, gregarious, and dramatic. So I think that's why we get along, because in essence, that's my original personality, even though I've become much calmer and quieter as an adult. That is my personality. So he's sort of my doggy soulmate. My other dogs are, one of them's very elderly and neurotic, and then the other one's kind of just shy and sweet. Yeah, they're all different. They all have different personalities, and God bless the dogs, because God gave us those dogs as gifts. So I love doggies. They're completely obnoxious and bratty, and sometimes I wish that I didn't have them, but they're still precious little blessings from God above. Kind of like, well, no, not kind of like children. Children are much bigger blessings because they're obviously our own species, and our own biological extensions of ourselves. Okay, now to focus. I had brought up the sign of Jonah being that when Jonah was told to speak, he needed to speak. And when he didn't speak, when he didn't do what God told him to do, a storm blew up when he was in a ship running away from God, and he was cast overboard and swallowed by a very large fish or a whale, depending on how you want to interpret that. And he spent 3 days and 3 nights in that well, which is an image of hell, before he was vomited up back on land and went and did what he was supposed to do. And I think what I really wanted to talk about is how much that plays out on a psychological level. And I think that's what Jordan Peterson was getting at. And as I said before in my previous video, I'm not a huge fan of Jordan Peterson, but there is a very strong psychological component to speaking up when we need to speak up. And it isn't always a prophetic word from God, but it is a compulsion in our souls when we feel very strongly that we need to speak up about something that's wrong, or something that is not necessarily wrong, but we feel needs to be said. And when we suppress that, it's to our own detriment, and we can go through periods of hell because we suppress that. And it is a natural instinct to suppress or hide negative things that are happening. As when we grow up as children, we all go through childhood trauma. It's just natural. It's the way of life. It's part of being human. Some of that trauma is obviously going to be greater than others. But when we suppress, here, I'm going to try to change arms since I'm holding it. Okay. When we don't speak out against it, which is our natural inclination, is just to hide it, and we think that it will just go away, then it tends to surface later in life as illness, whether that's mental illness or physical illness. It's hard to say how it will manifest, but it will usually manifest as illness in our lives. And obviously there are levels. When I say everybody experiences trauma in their lives, I don't mean that everybody experiences the level of trauma of chronic abuse as children, and we don't all experience the trauma of, say, what World War II soldiers experienced, what they called shell shock, because they didn't have the word PTSD. But even if our trauma isn't to that level, we are often treated badly. Some of us are bullied in school. Maybe our teachers belittle us. Maybe our parents neglect us or belittle us. And it's not to the level of abuse, but they still do. And when we just hold that inside, it creates trauma that will eventually come out as illness later in our lives unless we deal with it and decide to speak out about it. I was thinking about that because I can't really handle social media because it tends to be so vitriolic and negative. But there's an element to social media where we feel like we can talk about things that we never dealt with. And that is why it is such a negative experience, though, because there are so many people talking about their victimhood or trauma, and it's not fun. And there are a lot of angry people on there, but maybe that is a good path to healing, is to get that all off the chest. And as long as you don't dwell there permanently, then you can get over that trauma. I don't know, it's just a thought. I was thinking about that because in my book, my delivery driver, he has to rescue the heroine, but he eventually has to rescue the heroine's son, who is very suicidal and very angry and depressed and just completely traumatized because he feels guilty that he put out on social media all these bad things that his dad was doing, and then his dad committed suicide. And I'm not really giving anything away in the plot by saying that. That's something that is that's given at the beginning, but he feels this great guilt. But my detective is trying to find any way to ease this kid of guilt because he's trying to prevent him from like literally walking off a ledge. Although no, he's not on a ledge, but he is very depressed and suicidal. And that's one thing that he brings up, is that, well, social media gave you a platform to speak out against something bad that was happening in your life, and that's good. Now you need to get over the trauma that you faced when your dad passed away violently. Anyway, that is part of the mystery, how and why he passed away. Anyway, it doesn't make, like I said, it doesn't make social media a very fun experience, but I think that in that sense, it can be a benefit to humankind when it gives them a platform to speak about things that they did not feel capable of speaking out about in the past. And I hate to bring up, sometimes I don't really like talking about sex or gender based stereotypes, but it is the stereotype that women are more agreeable than men, and that they will suppress things that need to be said just to keep the peace, just so they don't create any chaos, so they don't have any confrontations, because they don't like confrontations. And I know that's not monolithic, but it can be true. And I think it's also encouraged by Christianity, because obviously in the Bible, women are encouraged to have gentle and quiet spirits. So what does that do to a woman when she thinks that she must always be gentle and quiet and never bring up the bad? Well, it actually manifests in disease and in autoimmune disorders, and also cancer. And women who are very gentle and quiet and people think that they're saints, they often die young of diseases like cancer. And yes, that is a correlation. The statistics are out there. Scientists who deny correlation, or they don't even want to think about correlation if it doesn't fit with their bias or agenda, they're kind of ridiculous scientists, because correlation is something that should always be looked at. And if there's a very strong positive correlation for women who are the saints of society, who are dying young of cancer or who are developing autoimmune disorders, then it is something that needs to be examined, because our psychology, our emotional state, we're not just physical material beings. We have souls and we have hearts and we have minds, and those need to be aligned with the truth. And at a certain point in our lives, we need to speak the truth. And if we don't, if we constantly suppress that for the needs of other people, then it can definitely manifest as illness in our lives. I'm not one of those people. I'm not one of those people who will be quiet and lay down everything for other people. And maybe I need to work on that and to be a little more gentle and quiet. Actually, I'm not a very talkative person. When I'm at home, I can be silent for hours and hours, and I'm okay with that. But I can also be very contrary, and I don't like letting people push me around. I was pushed around a lot at school as a child, and there's just no way. I'm not going to let people push me around. They can just, not be part of my life if they want to push me around. That's the way I feel about it. But actually, I'm in the yearly Bible, I'm on the book of Sirach. That's how you pronounce it. And that book kind of drives me crazy. It is wisdom literature. It's in the Bible, so I accept it. It's in the Catholic Bible. It's not in your Protestant Bibles, but I do accept it. But there are some annoying parts to it, like not that long ago, at least the English translation said that women need to be silent. Well, okay, of course they should be silent sometimes, but there are many times when women really need to speak out. So where's the wisdom literature stating this? I don't know. I find that the wisdom literature in the Bible is very male-centric, and that's probably a problem with my soul. So God's just gonna have to deal with me on that. I find that it's very male-centric, and I find that being gentle and quiet is sometimes the worst possible way that I can possibly be. And I guess the upshot for me is that when you need to speak, you need to speak. And when you need to be quiet, you need to be quiet. And that's actually the book of Ecclesiastes. There's a time and place for everything. And so women are human beings like men. And so what applies to men in the case of Ecclesiastes also applies to women. There is a time and place for everything. There's a time and place for speaking out, and there is a time and place for being silent. And that's really all I wanted to say. I meant to say it in my previous video, but I get really sidetracked because I really ought to make scripts and I don't. Maybe I will work on that. I don't know. But that would make it a lot less fun to do these videos, and it would make it a lot more time consuming too. So would editing my videos. My son gave me this criticism. I was showing him where our dog S'mores video bombed me, and he's like, gosh, Mom, your lighting is so yellow. And I'm like, well, that's because I have this really bad ring light, because I'm too cheap to buy a decent ring light, and it casts shadows on my face. So instead I just turned on the fluorescent light in the shed, and that's what it is. It's a horrible fluorescent light. And then I know I don't do video editing usually, but I added a little brightness to the video and saved it with a little extra brightness, which I think enhanced the yellowness in the, it is windy enough to make my nose run a little bit. It enhanced the yellowness, so my last video looks a little yellow, but that's because I'm too cheap to buy a decent ring light. I love the natural light. If I could film all the time in natural lighting, that would be amazing, but I don't always. It's just not always feasible for me to do that. It's just a lot easier for me to go out in my shed where it's quiet, nobody's around. And here at the Ave Maria Grotto during my lunch hour, nobody's around here either. So that also makes it optimal. You know, if there are people here, they're actually in Mass right now, the daily Mass. And so I just have, there are cars driving past, and hopefully if they see somebody staring and talking at their phone, they think they're just making a Zoom call or something. Yeah, we'll just go with that. Yeah, the lady sitting on the bench is just making a Zoom call. Not that anybody cares or even pays attention to people who are sitting on benches at churches as they drive past. Otherwise, there's just nobody here, and that's why it's optimal. Oh, there is somebody. We have a woodpecker who comes here quite frequently, and he is very unwanted, but we also have a friendly blue jay. I've talked a lot about the dragonflies that haunt my life. I love the little dragonflies, and even though the temperatures have gotten quite cold, I keep seeing dragonflies everywhere, not always in the natural world, although I did the other day. There was one I found hiding in the fall leaves that were skittering around in the wind on the ground. And I caught this movement and I looked over and there was a dragonfly. He was just sitting there in the fall leaves. I thought that was beautiful. But I keep seeing them in other weird contexts, like on a picture of an old Tiffany lamp, or a child's color by number picture, like a preschool or kindergarten color by number, and it was of a dragonfly. Or yesterday I was scrolling through YouTube and there was a still shot very up close of a golden dragonfly, and it turned out to be a video of a scientist who believes in creationism because of creatures like dragonflies, because of how creative and complex and amazing they are. Anyway, I agree with that because dragonflies are amazing. They they really are. But we have a blue jay who visits this church quite frequently. I've seen this blue jay a lot. I think it's a female because she's building a nest, and the males will usually bring the items and to her and for her to build. So I think it's a female. But anyway, I've long called her a him, but whatever. So the blue jay doesn't care if I make videos, though. No. Anyway, have a great rest of your Tuesday. This is also Thanksgiving week, so have a blessed Thanksgiving week, and I will see you again. Bye.